I just wanted to start off by highlighting some recent cybersecurity cases which have affected governmental entities over the last 2 years. Just to give you a little bit of perspective here before I go into some of the recommendations that maybe put in place in your organizations for improving your cybersecurity controls. This first case involved New York State, which was back in January 2020. In January 2020, New York State officials found themselves up against a massive cyber attack that disabled access to databases used by the state's civil service, environmental department, and police force. Again, this was likely the result of some foreign actors that were trying to hack their systems. But the bottom line here is the state received word about a potential flaw and also an available patch to fix the remedy for its Citrix-based systems in December of 2019. Fortunately, the state did not install the patch in time to prevent the issue. As a consequence, more than 80,000 state devices were vulnerable to malware compromise, and the state had to pay over 3 months of costs to do a forensic investigation to find out and correct their servers that were affected by this compromise. The second one I wanted to just briefly touch on occurred in Oldsmar, Florida in February of 2021. This attack didn't compromise any data access or expose files. Instead, it nearly poisoned the town's 15,000 residents. On February 5th of 2021, a plant operator at the local water treatment facility received an alert that someone had gained remote access to their systems. The attacker opened multiple applications and services and increased the concentration of sodium hydroxide, which is also called lye, to 100 times its normal level. Fortunately, the operators were able to retake control and cancel the change quickly and prevent any further disastrous consequences. And this last example involves a service provider, which affected multiple municipalities in June of 2021. This was reported by Z.net, and this happened across many municipalities across the United States. A Massachusetts service provider used misconfigured Amazon S3 buckets. Now you're asking, what is an Amazon S3 bucket? This is used for storage of data using Amazon's web services, which a lot of providers are now using. As a result of this compromise, more than 1,000 gigabytes of data and 1.6 million files were exposed. This included email addresses, physical addresses, driver's license information, along with deed and tax records. So I just wanted to give you a little bit of insight of what's going out in the environment right now as far as cybersecurity that's affected municipalities and government agencies. Now, this next slide, I just wanted to touch on what I consider three of the biggest challenges that are being incurred for governmental entities in the cybersecurity world right now. The first one is replacing their outdated systems and applications. It is estimated at this time about 1/3 of government and municipality systems are out of date, which means they're using legacy systems which are older than probably, I would say, 10 to 15 years old. The second challenge is managing access to systems and applications. This means adding and removing users' access rights timely when they put new users on, as well as when people terminate from an institution. And if you're a larger entity, this is particularly a challenge if you're using multiple type systems and applications, as well as if you are allowing remote access into your systems. And the third challenge, I think, is remediation in response to cybersecurity threats. I look at this in a three-phase approach. First, you got to detect the threat if somebody's gotten into your system. Second is responding to the threat. And lastly, it's minimizing the damage from the threat. So we're going to talk a little bit about these briefly in some of the recommendations that I have put forward here in the next couple slides. Okay, first off, I think, at least what I do with a lot of organizations I work with, we first perform a cybersecurity risk assessment. And you're asking, what is that? Well, It's a risk assessment of potential vulnerabilities in your systems. This could include change management of applications. It could be your hardware, your network equipment, the software you're utilizing, your network and Wi-Fi access points, access to applications, and also to storage of sensitive data. It includes your environmental controls, which could be your air conditioning, your fire prevention over your systems, as well as physical access to your IT systems. And the purpose of doing this exercise is you identify all your risks, and then you take a look at and say, okay, what mitigating controls do I have in place to minimize that risk to a low level assessment? And going through this exercise, you will probably identify some gaps in your current control environment that you may want to look at. And I think it's a good exercise to go through. And a lot of organizations don't do this. They do the penetration test, they'll do the vulnerability assessment, but they don't take a look at the rest of the environment, which I think would be kind of eye opening for you, as it might recognize some potential weaknesses in your systems. Second one I look at is to look at your cybersecurity policies and procedures. Currently, I go in and I look at and I ask the question, okay, has your IT environment changed? Yes, we put in a new system 2 years ago. We put in a new network. We put in a new backup system. And I go to look at the policies and I see they're like 10, 15 years old. I start to always ask the question, have you updated these lately to meet what your new environment is? And a lot of times the clients will say, well, no, we haven't, or we haven't had time, we don't have the resources. Well, I always look back at and say one of your first levels of addressing a cybersecurity risk is to look at your policies. What are you allowing your employees to do? What are you allowing your vendors to do? And I think that's a good thing to take a look at. Forced password management policies. I don't know how many times I've gone in, especially in large organizations where they're managing multiple platforms, multiple systems, and I see the password policy will say this. This is what we're doing. We're requiring minimum 10 characters, mix uppercase, lowercase letters, special symbols, do changes every 60 to 90 days, and we also have timeout features in our systems. But then I go to look at the applications, I find that the password management policy for one system may be in compliance with the policy, but then I go and look at another system and it's not, it's different. So it's important to really look across the whole spectrum, your network, your core system, to make sure that the password policy that you are requiring is consistent across the board for your organization. Multi-factor authentication. I know this is an area that we all are aware of now, especially in our own personal lives. If we go to access our online banking statement, we go to access our credit card information, we always get a text or an email code back to our phone saying, please re-enter this, verify it's you. Well, it's important to also maybe put that in place for your business, your entity, because especially if you're using remote access, you want to make sure that who's getting in your system is the person that you've authorized to get in your system. Another recommendation is encryption. This is where you scramble your data, whether it could be in transit when you send an email, or it could be when you store it on the cloud. Encryption scrambles your data, so just in case if your system is compromised, anybody that's a threat will not be able to read it. I found a lot of organizations do that, but you want to make sure that whether it's your applications, your email systems, your cloud services, you want to make sure that that is enabled. It's important to have that enabled so that to prevent that being breached. Regularly perform security updates to your systems and applications. You want to make sure that you are installing any patches that your vendors may be providing to your systems and applications, since that will be another way to prevent a bad actor from getting in your system. And as you can see, as I stated in that New York State example, they had the patch, but they never installed it. And it resulted in a lot of lost downtime and cost to the government. This last slide, I just want to touch on some things. Employee education and training. Employee compliance is your first line of defense. They are the most important people that I think this is the most important thing to preventing cybersecurity breaches. Employee training is critical. and it's important that you perform regular training programs annually. I've seen a lot of clients perform a social engineering exercises where they might send out fictitious emails to see if the employees are paying attention to what they've been trained for. They click on the email. Well, probably they shouldn't have. So that's going to give the organization sort of an idea of what their compliance with policies are. And it's important that employees know that are they recognizing the threats they're trained for, and that they're able to detect these before they occur. Daily backup of systems and applications. I've had some instances of this year where clients were hit by ransomware. They've had to pay the breakout fee to get their systems back. Two instances I can think of, they didn't have backups of data. The data was not backed up current. They were doing weekly backups. They weren't doing it daily. So it is important, again, to do backups of your systems and applications, whether it's through do it locally or you do it to the cloud. You want to make sure that that is occurring. Another suggestion, annual due diligence of significant vendors. This could be a lot of people use payroll outsourced vendors. They use their main core application provider for their accounting system might be a vendor. But it's important to maybe take a look at what are your vendors' practices for cybersecurity. This could be you can check that by reviewing the vendor contract that you have with them, maybe inquiring about how they handle confidentiality of data, what is their practices. I know one of the things that we look at as auditors, we request that the vendor has it as a SOC report. These come in two types. There's a type 1 report, which is basically used for your financial audit, and the report is issued by an audit firm. And you can look through that and see what controls are in place over the application that you're using, the vendor's application, as well as maybe some cybersecurity things might be included in there, particularly related to access and change management. If the vendor is really sophisticated, they might even have a type 2 done for a technology risk assessment, which is more of a robust service where they're complying with certain standards issued by the AICPA, which will give you a sort of an idea of what their risk controls are within that organization. This fourth bullet here, I think is pretty critical, incident response planning. I can tell you I have gone to many clients, larger clients, organizations. I say, okay, how do you detect a threat? They'll walk me through the process. This is how we detect it. This is how we respond to it. This is what we do to minimize it. Okay, and I say, well, where's your written response plan? Because that lays out the steps. I say, well, we don't have one. Well, I think it's important to have that because it basically sets out your procedures that you use to identify, investigate, and respond to a cyber attack, which will then result in reduce the impact of your organization and return it to normal operations as quickly as possible. And as part of that plan, you're able to do what they call a walkthrough test, where you can go do the plan says A, B, and C. You can actually do a walkthrough of that plan to make sure it meets what their operations are, just in case, unfortunately, if hopefully you never have to use it, but it's good to have it in place. And the last thing I pointed out here was purchasing cyber insurance. Cyber insurance obviously covers possible losses from a cyber attack. One of the things I recommend, again, going back to that cybersecurity risk assessment, if you've proactively done that cybersecurity risk assessment, it will show any insurance agency that you are proactive in addressing cybersecurity risk. And this evaluation that you've done may actually result in not also getting the policy, but also might result in some lower premiums to you as an organization. So I recommend possibly looking at cyber insurance, but it's important that you do that risk assessment ahead of time to identify any weaknesses that are in your organization.